This is Matthew Kratter's Bitcoin University. Today I wanted to make a reaction video to Matt Odell talking about BIP-110 on Rabbit Hole Recap. This is something I've covered in a couple of videos here, Matt Odell maligning BIP-110, and then of course the great Mano a Mano Maxi Matt Mayhem video. But a number of people have asked me if I could address more of the points that he made in that video. So I figured the easiest way to do it is just to do a reaction video. And you can tell me in the comment section below whether you like this sort of video or whether you don't. But we're going to listen to it for about 20 minutes and I will pause it and give you my reaction to various things that he says. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, so this should be interesting.
Yeah. I see you're going off on it on Master. What's going on here?
Dude, I mean, look, I was hoping that, this is the thing that happened in 2017 where you can you agree with people on 99% of things. And then that last 1%, it's just like, it's over. Cannot agree. So I was hoping we could come to a reasonable conclusion. I was trying to remain as independent as possible, particularly given, my leadership position at OpenSats. But I think that ship has sailed. I don't think, I don't think they're operating with good intentions. I just straight up do not think that they're operating with good intentions. And yes, that's not an objective take. That's a subjective take. But I think the entire point of BIP-110, so freaks that might not be aware somehow, for starters, Core overstepped their bounds last year and changed the default mempool policy on Bitcoin Core. And that stopped filtering a upper turn limit, right? This data blob consensus valid area of Bitcoin where you can put anything you want, basically. Now, that was already consensus valid. They didn't actually change Bitcoin. In practice, who changed Bitcoin the most was probably Peter Todd when he released Libra Relay.
I think that's actually a really good point that Matt Odell makes right there. Libra Relay is basically Bitcoin Core without filters, and anything that's consensus valid, if you give it to a Libra Relay node, it will shoot straight to one of the malicious miners like F2 Pool or Mara. And I think what happened here, I don't think Matt really goes into it, but I think what happened in retrospect, as I begin to put these pieces together, is that basically op returns and certain things were getting through because of Peter Todd's attack on the network. And this provided the justification for Bitcoin Core saying, well, these things are already making their way to miners. We might as well just open it up and force everyone's node who's using the default settings to also send these to miners. So I think that's a good point. And as you can see from my video yesterday, I do consider Peter Todd to be one of the worst actors in the space. So Matt Odell and I can agree on that.
And to be frank, he can go fuck himself for that. But as soon as Libra Relay was out there, it was relaying these large op return transactions. And Core looked at it and they said, why are Core nodes blocking this? And they kind of looked at it from mostly a technical point of view. And I think they overstepped their bounds. Like they should have just not done that, especially when they're...
And the further context, which I think it's important to note for Bitcoin Core blowing open op return in 2025, is they had refused for the past 2 years before that, from 2023 to 2025, to fix the inscriptions exploit. So not only did they fix something that was broken, an actual taproot vulnerability that allowed inscriptions and BRC20 tokens, but then they went a step further and opened up op return. And I think that's a very important context to take into account.
There's any resistance against it. So once that happened, the guys at Ocean Mining, Luke and Mechanic specifically, realized an opportunity to increase their status and control over Bitcoin. And so they convinced a mob. They riled up a mob who means well, I think, probably for the most part, but they riled up a mob into believing that Bitcoin was fundamentally changed, even though no consensus rules were changed.
No consensus rules were changed, but this marked a huge cultural shift from 2023, culminating in 2025. And it's not quite a consensus change, but when you have the default settings, the default policy settings for the reference implementation, these have a huge effect. And what's even bigger than consensus and what determines consensus is the overriding Bitcoin culture that sort of sits beneath all of this. And as the culture gets corrupted, eventually it works its way into mempool policy getting corrupted and consensus getting corrupted as well. And the fact that Bitcoin Core was unwilling to fix the inscriptions exploit is an excellent marker of this. I think it's quite unfair for Odell, to say that this was viewed as an opportunity by Ocean and Mechanic to somehow increase Ocean mining's status. What happened, in fact, is this was a huge distraction. This created a lot of volatility. This drove a lot of people away from Ocean mining at the time when Ocean needed these people the most in its startup phase. So I think what Odell's missing here, this has been bad for my channel. It's been bad for subs. It's been bad for revenues. I don't think it's been good for Ocean. I think it's really complicated their story. But the thing here is that Ocean and the people who work for it, like Mechanic and Luke Dasher, are principled people who tried to do this the right way. And they received a lot of resistance from the Bitcoin community over really silly things. For example, Samurai saying that they were censoring coin joins when in fact they were just running 40-byte op returns, etc. So there was a lot of chaos here that was caused by Mechanic and Luke and other people at Ocean doing the right thing. It's very hard to view this as some sort of power grab.
There was no fork of Bitcoin. So they've been doing that for a while, and then it was kind of obvious this was the path they were going to go, which is why I was very hesitant to recommend people run knots. But then they announced their fork of Bitcoin.
What Odell and Marty actually did is they completely ignored this conflict. They refused to cover it. They basically said, run whatever software you want. And they really refused to engage in the debate, hoping that it would go away, because this is very painful when we have Bitcoin civil wars like this, and you have to put your reputation on the line. And if you go back and look at RHRs over the past year or so, they really haven't covered this. And now we hear perhaps that's one reason that Odell was holding back on encouraging people to run knots, in spite of the fact that the reference implementation went rogue in 2025 and probably as early as 2023 when they refused to fix the inscriptions exploit.
Specifically, a soft fork of Bitcoin that constricts rules rather than a clean hard fork. And the reason they did that is not to stop spam, as they pretend it is. The reason they did it is to have more control over Bitcoin.
This is the part of Odell's argument that I don't really understand, and I wish he would flesh it out more. I don't see how he thinks that this soft fork will give people like Mechanic and Luke Dasher more power, because again, we're always in the same situation where if people don't like Bitcoin knots plus BIP-110 or whatever Luke is doing, they can always switch back to core. There'll be competing reference implementations. And as Odell points out many times, no one can force you to run a certain amount of software or a certain kind of software. That's up to you to choose. And we've witnessed in the last 12 months, we've witnessed the massive exodus out of Bitcoin Core into Bitcoin knots. And if Mechanic and Luke had some plan to try to change things, what's going to happen? There's going to be another exodus. And if they go rogue like Bitcoin Core did, I will do my best to lead the exodus, just like I led the exodus out of Core into knots. Meanwhile, Odell and Marty were working on their VC investments, and they weren't paying very close attention to this, by their own admission, hoping that this civil war, this crisis would go away.
It won't stop spam, in fact. And right now,
we never claimed that BIP-110 would stop spam. If Matt Odell had taken time to actually read BIP-110 at BIP110.org. Does this solve spam completely? No, spam is best fought with policy filters, not consensus. This soft fork minimizes the impact of malicious miners and closes the worst case risks while sending a clear message that data storage is not a supported use case.
There is very little consensus and support for BIP-110. It probably will not have significant.
That is basically just assuming the conclusion. As we've showed on this channel, it's currently at about 5, 6, 7% of the network, people running BIP-110, Bitcoin knots plus BIP-110, this actually has huge support. And I would say the vast, vast majority, probably 90% of Bitcoiners hate spam. And as you're going to hear Odell say later on in the same video, he absolutely hates spam. So I think he's assuming the conclusion. And again, if this thing did not have popular support, he wouldn't have spent 20 minutes talking about it. And this is the real contradiction we see. All these people saying BIP-110 will never activate, will never be successful. And yet they're tweeting about it 100 times a day because they're actually seeing it gain traction. So I think he's being disingenuous here.
Industry support between miners and node runners and everybody, all the stakeholders of Bitcoin.
Well, miners don't have a say. They are employees of the network, and it's the node runners who make up the rules for the network. So I think Matt needs to review his understanding of how consensus works. We don't work for the miners work for the node runners.
And like I said earlier, when that happens, Bitcoin doesn't change. But the way they have it set up is it can have, 1% of hash rate, very little support, and it can just sit there. And if it ever gets more...
Again, he's conflating support. He's worried about whether these large mining pools support something that stops spam. This is not how it works. The support comes from the node runners, and we have lots of tools at our disposal to force the miners to follow the rules that we set for the network.
More support, it will reorg the entire Bitcoin chain. Thousands of Bitcoin transactions could be reversed, causing massive damage to Bitcoin. And what I am speculating right now, and yes, this is speculation because they will deny it until they do it, which is a convenient situation for them to be in, is they will get to that point. Their fork will not have anywhere near levels of consensus on people wanting to run it. And they will start spamming the main chain. And they might even spam it with really despicable things.
So this is an interesting admission here. Matt Odell is admitting that the legacy chain, which is the Bitcoin blockchain today, has these vulnerabilities. And yet I haven't heard a word from his mouth what he wants to do about it. I've heard him say that transaction fees will price out spam eventually. But here he is admitting openly that the Bitcoin blockchain today is open to lots of nasty things. This is a problem. I'd love to hear Matt and Marty's solution for this. And to accuse us of being the ones, if there is a chain split, us of being the ones, people like Luke and Mechanic and myself, who are Christian family men, that somehow we're going to pull out the CSAM, find it somewhere online, upload it, and stick it on the legacy chain. I think this is very a terrible ad hominem. I certainly don't think that Matt and Marty are pervs or pedophiles of any sort. And so I'd appreciate if they wouldn't accuse us of stuff like that. But it's an interesting admission. He's basically admitting that Bitcoin is open to this attack at the moment. And in terms of this talk about a chain split, we'll talk a little bit more about it later in this video. But what he's talking about is if there were a chain split and the BIP-110 side wipes out the other side of the chain, there could be many transactions lost. Well, we don't want a chain split, which is why this soft fork is initially set up as a miner activated soft fork. And what Matt and Marty are doing here is they're actually sandbagging it. They're making it less likely that miners will pick up and activate this. We would like to do this as a very orderly miner-activated soft fork. We're giving the large mining pools this chance. And yet we have Bitcoiners like Matt and Marty, who by their own admission hate spam, are trying for some reason to throw up roadblocks. So this is very disingenuous. There definitely will not be a chain split if everyone who hates spam, like Matt and Marty, joins us and we put pressure on the miners today to activate this. If this activates as a miner-activated soft fork, there will be no chain split. So keep that in mind as you're listening to the disaster scenario that he actually, through his words, is making increasingly likely by just assuming there's going to be a chain split. Whereas if they just throw their support behind this soft fork, and again, if you're against spam, there's no reason not to support the soft fork. This is what will prevent the chain split.
I would really hope they don't. At least at one point, I had a lot of respect for these people, so I hope they don't do that. But I think they will start spamming it heavily. And then they will...
It's funny, the side that's against spam is going to be the one that's going to spam that chain. I think the people on our side, the people I interact with, are very high integrity individuals, whereas the spammers are not. Ironically, though, if the spammers do spam the legacy chain, it could end up driving miners to the BIP-110 side of the chain.
We'll start threatening miners to try and do a hostile reorg of the chain. That is incredibly fucked up.
No one is going to threaten miners. This is the old FUD about Ocean somehow calling up lawyers and threatening other mining pools. Basically, if you're a mining pool and you have a choice of two blockchains, and one is full of CSAM and spam simply because it was blown open by Bitcoin Core, and one is a clean chain without all of this non-monetary data, which isn't just a problem with CSAM. There's just so many problems you can run into across multiple jurisdictions with non-monetary data. And this is why Bitcoin as a network, as a monetary network, should try to keep the amounts of non-monetary data to the bare minimum. And anyone who understands this will support BIP-110. So it's not about Ocean or lawyers or anyone threatening that side. Why in the world would you want to mine on a chain that is full of CSAM? Why would you want to be a node runner on that side? This is because Bitcoin Core opened up OpReturn, which is the place where you put this stuff. It is the place for non-monetary data. People will still be able to hack stuff in stenographically, but this is the designated place for non-monetary data, as Matt just said a couple minutes ago.
That is an attack on Bitcoin. It is reckless. It is unnecessary. And that is not fence sitting. That is not...
It's interesting that this is the first time I've heard Matt Odell talk about an attack on Bitcoin. He and Marty have been oddly silent for the past few years. It's funny because I've been talking about how this is an attack on Bitcoin, and this is an attack on Bitcoin. Inscriptions, all of this garbage, as well as blowing open OpReturn so you can put these really large files and these large JPEGs and images there. How come Matt and Marty have never talked about that being an attack on Bitcoin? I don't remember a 20-minute rant about those things, but it's probably because David Bailey is an investor in Taproot Wizards, and Matt likes going to the Bitcoin conference and being a speaker. And so the real way to attack this, I've been attacking Bitcoin Magazine for a few years here. I've done the Adam Back and Epstein connection, etc. But this is probably one reason that RHR, TFTC have been oddly silent about these various attacks on Bitcoin, including, for example, trying to corrupt the most important living person in Bitcoin, which is Adam Back, his fact that he visited a certain place. And when that was released as part of the Epstein Isles, I made video after video after video about it, because this is very important. If one of the most prominent Bitcoiners has been somehow compromised, he should probably be kept pretty far away from Bitcoin protocol discussion. And again, this is all just allegations at this point, but I think there's fairly good evidence for it. And again, this could be an attack on Bitcoin. What do Odell and Marty make a whole video about it, talk about it a lot? No, instead, just a few allusions at RHR, and then Odell on Nostr saying seeing prominent Bitcoiners in the Epstein emails and is incredibly disappointing and effed up. Well, these are all possible attacks on Bitcoin. And it's funny, it's weird that all of a sudden BIP-110, good family men like Mechanic, Luke Dasher, and myself are pushing for this to close some of the attack surfaces on Bitcoin. We're the attack on Bitcoin, but Inscriptions, Taproot Wizard, the Bitcoin Magazine scam empire, Adam Back possibly going to Epstein Island. I haven't heard them do 20-minute rants on this. So that's a little bit odd.
This is the same logical approach to Bitcoin, which is first, do no harm.
Do no harm. This is what Inscriptions, BRC20 tokens, they're now 38% of the UTXO set. Taproot outputs are 85 or 90% Inscriptions dust. This has done an incredible amount of harm to Bitcoin, and in particular to node operators. And what have Matt and Marty had to say about it over the past few years? Oh, just run core knots, whatever works best for you. We're not really going to get involved. So these are all attacks on Bitcoin as well, and they've been oddly silent about them.
Do not let a lynch mob pressure you into supporting a fucking...
Again, this is not a lynch mob. This is a bunch of Bitcoin plebs who are upset by the influencer class, by the Bitcoin Magazine industrial complex, and by people like Matt and Marty refusing to talk about these real issues because they don't really want to rock the boat. They want their portfolio companies to be able to IPO or get acquired. And so I think calling Bitcoin plebs, many of whom are running nodes for the first time, this has been a huge revolution. This has been very good for Bitcoin, getting Bitcoin plebs to run Bitcoin nodes. This is somehow a lynch mob. That's just absolutely absurd.
Hostile fork of Bitcoin. All forks are default to no to begin with. You need a overwhelming reason if you want to try and push a fork for Bitcoin in my.
And here's an overwhelming reason. Bitcoin has been under attack for the past 3 years. Bitcoin is a monetary network, and that's why we're doing this soft fork to drive the spammers and scammers away. That seems like a pretty good reason, a pretty good justification to me. And I'd have to ask them at what point, if the UTXO set was 95% inscriptions dust and garbage, would they then be in favor of this? Or would they just let it get to 100% and basically let Bitcoin turn into a data storage network?
In my opinion, I would never do it personally.
You would never do it personally because you don't want to rock the boat when you have all these portfolio companies. And again, a soft fork is not something that we want to do. But at a certain point, when the influencer class, when all these people, when Bitcoin Core is sitting on their hands and no one has the courage to get anything done, and we're watching the chain fill up with absolute garbage like this, we're watching UTXO set bloat take off, we're watching Bitcoin culture get corrupted, we're seeing all these shitcoiners coming to the Bitcoin conference. This is when you need to take action as the culture is being corrupted.
So that's that's where we're at currently. Their activation that they're going to try and force through is in September.
No, actually, the activation could happen today if we would just all pull together, put pressure on the mining pools. I'm not sure why Matt and Marty think the mining pools need to keep mining spam and filling up our nodes, filling up our mempools, filling up blocks with garbage. So again, this is a miner activated soft fork. It looks like Matt forgot to mention that, maybe because he's unaware of it and hasn't read it. But what he's doing here, again, is delaying our revolution and pulling the miners back into control.
Most Bitcoin Twitter influencers, the only thing they have going for them is popularity on the internet. So they have folded to the Bitcoin mob. They have folded to the lynch mob.
It's actually most of the Bitcoin influencers do not want to rock the boat. They want to keep getting invited to the Bitcoin Magazine conference, etc. So we've seen really it's just been a small minority of us who have been fighting against it. And it's actually much easier just to make videos about Bitcoin treasury companies and number go up and Trump and strategic Bitcoin reserve and all of this sort of stuff, quantum FUD, etc. When Bitcoin is actually under attack, when one of the most prominent Bitcoiners may have been to Epstein Island, all these things are much, much more important. And yet the influencer class has not been covering it. Matt and Marty are the two greatest examples of this, perhaps.
And if you don't agree with the lynch mob, you're quote unquote captured. The whole thing just reeks of hypocrisy. So I just want to say loud and clear.
Not necessarily captured, but there are incentives. And again, if you did what I did, making videos about David Bailey in the Bitcoin conference, you would not see your face here being invited to the Bitcoin conference. So again, it's not that someone's a pedophile or a perv or somehow compromised by the deep state or something, but it's you can look at how the incentives work. And again, when you have lots of portfolio companies, it makes it even more complicated when you're invested in Strike. And Jack Mallers is doing all this stuff with the Lutnick family, and he's sitting on stage with Lutnick, who's a close Epstein associate. It gets a little harder to call these things out when you're part of that network. So I wouldn't say they're captured, but again, you have to follow the incentives and see why people are doing the things that they do.
Clear here, BIP-110 is an attack on Bitcoin. I'm greatly disappointed in everyone who.
Again, this is the first time in 3 years that I've heard Odell and Marty say that something's an attack on Bitcoin. So it's pretty funny that this would be the first time they raise their voices and call something an attack on Bitcoin.
Is riling up a mob, trying to pressure people into doing it. These people will fail. History will look back on them horribly.
These people will fail, which is why you keep talking about it, because you know it's actually going to succeed.
And you can try and cancel me, but I don't really care about your fucking popularity contest. I do not give a shit. Bitcoin is the best money. We need to accelerate freedom money. The enemies are at the gates. And it's now or never. My family relies on this shit. Marty's family relies on this shit. Freak's family rely on this shit.
And of course, Luke's family, Mechanic's family, my family, we all rely on Bitcoin. And this is why we're stepping up to defend it, while the influencer class, while the crypto and Bitcoin VC class is sitting on their hands. So we don't want a disruption. We don't want a chain split. We don't want any of this. But again, at what point are you actually going to step up and take a stand? Or are you just going to let the Bitcoin culture degrade to this point where everyone agrees with people like Peter Todd that Bitcoin's nothing special. It's just this agnostic data platform. This is the deterioration of Bitcoin culture that we've been seeing. And again, all of our families depend on Bitcoin. And so I don't understand why you're dying, why Matt and Marty would be dying on this hill trying to go against BIP-110, especially when they're both against spam. They've never invested in these spam companies. It's very, very bizarre.
And we're not going to go down without swinging. You will fail.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying this since the op return. I think I co-sign what you said. I don't think it was a great decision by Core to push through that policy change. But again, I've been pretty consistent with this.
You've been consistently avoiding it.
Since I was at Bitcoin Plus Plus in Austin last year, so almost a year ago. Like, if it's consensus valid, like, yes, the policy may change and many people may not like it, but it's consensus.
Yeah, if it's consensus valid, if people are hacking in complete garbage, and if people are opening up op returns so larger op returns can be relayed, again, these things are allowed, but are they desired? Do they make Bitcoin better money? And at what point are you going to take a stand? Or are you just going to let spam price out monetary transactions? You're going to let your mempool fill up with spam when you're trying to make a Bitcoin transaction.
This is valid. Like, I don't know why we're squabbling this much. And to your point too, like BIP-10, I've seen the lynch mob. They've been in my mentions, and you just haven't convinced me that this is worthwhile or advantageous.
That's because Marty, you actually haven't spent the time to engage with this debate. You haven't even read the BIP-110 website. I can see by the way you guys talk about this, you haven't put in the time. So the worst thing you can do is get in the way of something as important as this. You don't have to like it. We can do this without you. But to actually be providing an obstacle, to be putting obstacles in our way, this is extremely foolish. And this is exactly the kind of thing that leads to a chain split like we all would like to avoid.
Successfully. And so that's why.
No, they've done the opposite.
Yeah.
They've done the opposite. They've tried their hardest. It was never about convincing. They've tried their hardest to alienate us and make us their enemies.
So what are we supposed to do? We keep talking about this week after week, month after month. People are asleep at the switch. No one's calling out what's happening at Bitcoin Core, the nepotism, the corruption. And so to sort of tone police the way we've handled this, we've tried to do the best we can. But again, Twitter's a violent place. Bitcoin's a violent place. Rhetorically, of course, only. What exactly do you expect us to do when Bitcoin is under attack? And for some reason, the Bitcoin VC class and the influencer class refuse to do anything about it. If you ignore Bitcoin plebs, eventually they reach the point where they come out with their pitchforks. And if you guys had actually engaged in this debate in an honest way, that we'd never have gotten to this place, because I've literally been making videos about this for 9 months nonstop, and you guys have been ignoring it in all your videos and on your channel.
And now
we're captured.
They have to deal with the fucking result. They have to deal with the fucking result. That's how it's going to go down. It's really disappointing. It's really disappointing, but it is what it is. And I've said this many times, and I'm sure the previous part will get clipped out of context without this part. But once again, I'm not happy with what Core did. I think the answer...
You're not happy with it, but what sort of actions have you taken? What are you going to do about it? And are you going to let the situation continue to deteriorate? We're about action here in Bitcoin. And just saying you're not happy about something, that's really not good enough. That's how politicians talk.
Here is more implementations and more choices for Bitcoin. I don't think Core should control Bitcoin, and I don't think they do. And I don't think Luke and Mechanic should control Bitcoin. Unfortunately, they don't either. And we will keep it that way. And the best way to stop that from happening is to give people that care about Bitcoin, that are working on Bitcoin, talented people, an ethical, transparent, reliable way of getting funding. So they don't go to fucking Epstein to get funding. So they don't go to get, an investment check from Jack Dorsey to get Matt.
I would actually agree with this. And in my videos, you'll probably notice that I have not attacked OpenSats, which Matt helped to set up and which has funding from Jack Dorsey. The guilty funders here, the ones who are funding, for example, Gloria, has been more like Brink and Chain Code Labs. And so I would agree with Matt here, and I would applaud that the work he's done for OpenSats. I think it's very important. And maybe everything, the grants haven't been perfect. Maybe there haven't been enough NOTS developers receiving funding or whatever. But I don't think that people should beat Matt up over this, because I think he does have good intentions. And I think OpenSats has done a lot of good.
Massive salary to attack Bitcoin. So you can actually have independent thought in Bitcoin, and node operators can have more choices. Because you can't just, this whole idea of like defund all dev operations movement is just, it's a fallacy. Because if you don't provide them that path, they will take a much worse path.
It's a fallacy. I think sort of the parallel path, besides things like OpenSats, what I would personally like to see is perhaps more, and it becomes a problem because all of the early Bitcoin core devs, many of them just made a lot of money in Bitcoin, so they had the leisure time and they had the right approach. They owned a lot of Bitcoin, so they didn't want to do anything to harm Bitcoin. And one of the problems with the current funding model is you have younger devs who don't have as much money, they don't have as much Bitcoin, and so many of them just view it as a programming gig. So one solution, I think OpenSats is a great solution. But another solution, and it sounds sort of crass to say, is just have more perhaps mature middle-aged Bitcoiners who are Bitcoin rich volunteer and work on the protocol. This is another solution, and maybe it'll become increasingly less possible as Bitcoin's price continues to appreciate, and you don't have these OG devs that have a lot of Bitcoin. But that's probably the most neutral people are the independently wealthy Bitcoin people who can do what's best for Bitcoin because they have all their wealth in it. Whereas the people who used to do ICOs, teach ICO classes at UC Berkeley about how to do ICOs on Ethereum, they may not be the best stewards of Bitcoin. But maybe we have things like OpenSats, and then hopefully we have some wealthy Bitcoin devs who work for NOTS or work for Core and basically give back to the protocol that has made them rich.
And Bitcoin will be worse off for it.
Agreed. And just a point of clarification too, you said they'll reorg the whole chain, just for semantic sort of accuracy here. They won't be able to reorg the whole chain, but I think if they got significant hash rate, they could disrupt probably like the better part of a day's worth of blocks and transactions.
Well, it's from the point of activation. So like, by the way, Udi, all those Taproot Wizard guys, they can all go fuck themselves too.
If you don't like those guys, you really should support BIP-110.
They said it would actually make their previous inscriptions more valuable. Because
that's complete nonsense, because they won't be able to move their inscriptions after this. So I think they're bluffing there. Basically, if BIP-110 goes through, inscriptions is finished on Bitcoin, they can try to retool it, but they're not going to get the crypto VC funding. They're not going to get the devs. They're not going to get the eyeballs, because people don't like being rugged. And so the projects will move to Ethereum and Solana as they should.
Because you'd have to do a different path to spam the chain. So those would be unique and rare.
It's like, here we are stuck in the middle with you, with a bunch of assholes surrounding us.
Dude, it could be longer than the way they have it set up and their goal, right?
The only reason you're stuck in the middle is because you haven't done your work on this protocol, on BIP-110, on this soft fork proposal. If you had done the work, you would be firmly on our side. I can assure you of that.
Now, and once again, they've been very careful about what they say publicly, but their goal is to reorg the chain. And it could be...
No, our goal is to get a miner activated soft fork so there is no chain split. That is our goal. That's explicitly in BIP-110. It starts off as an MASF, a miner activated soft fork, and then only at the last minute does it apply pressure directly to the miners through a UASF. So I think they're both being a little bit disingenuous here.
Be a week. Just imagine what kind of damage that does to Bitcoin. If you are in a situation where people that care more about controlling Bitcoin and their own ego would rather reorg
their own subjective view of what it...
I think actually the idea of a chain split lasting for a week, I think if we were to get a chain split, which I think we're going to be able to avoid because I think the miners are going to capitulate, But if we were to have a chain split, I imagine it would be closer to 24, 36 hours. This is how chain splits have lasted in the past, some of the chain splits in very early Bitcoin history. And I think just the way the game theory works, that this is not going to be an extended chain split. But again, if Matt and Marty want to avoid a chain split and they hate spam, it's an absolute no-brainer to be rallying to our side and helping to put pressure on the large mining pools to activate this as a miner activated soft fork. There's nothing in any of Matt or Marty's portfolio companies that would be hurt by this. It doesn't make any sense for them to oppose it, except perhaps ego and lack of humility at this point. But I think they should stay humble and accept BIP-110.
But should be too, right? Like,
Sure, they want to control Bitcoin.
No one wants to control Bitcoin. No one can control Bitcoin. If BIP-110 passes, this doesn't give Mechanic or Luke or Ocean or me or anybody any extra power, except perhaps some vindication saying, look, this was a problem. We solved it. Thank you very much. But none of us has any ambitions to control Bitcoin. When you listen to Luke talk, when you listen to Mechanic talk, these are very soft-spoken people. All the arrogant people who want to destroy Bitcoin or want to control Bitcoin or say they broke Bitcoin, these are the Peter Todds, these are the taproot wizards of the world. All the arrogance, all the angling for control is on the spammer side, as we've seen. The BIP-110 side is family men, soft-spoken men, and people who just want to get this fixed. There's no ego about it.
We'll rather reorg a week's worth of Bitcoin transactions while gaslight.
Again, Matt's assuming the conclusion here that somehow this chain split will go on for a week. It's possible that would happen, but what he's not telling you here again is if we get the miners to activate it first, we're not even going to get a chain split.
Us and tell us they care more about Bitcoin as money, but they want to disrupt reverse a week of Bitcoin transaction, if not more, if they don't have their way. So how does the reorg work? I see Prophecy saying, okay, so look, it's a very clever attack, the way they have it set up. So BIP-110 restricts the rule set of blocks, right? So every block that's valid on the BIP-110 chain is valid also on the existing chain. And so if BIP-110 actually had overwhelming consensus, let's say...
Again, he's assuming the conclusion there. I think it does have overwhelming consensus. And the thing about this soft fork is even if you are not in favor of it, the only way to be against it is to actually do a user resisted or user rejected soft fork, a UASF. So I think that's what he's missing. But the bigger point is that most Bitcoiners view Bitcoin as a monetary network, apart just from a few scammers and spammers and the David Bailey Bitcoin Magazine industrial complex. And certainly Matt and Marty really aren't on that side. And so I find it a bit disingenuous.
75, 80, 90% of the network supported it. It's hard to calculate until it happens, but
we can never get to that level of support, especially if you're talking about hash rate, because we have so many malicious miners mining spam. And so that's why the threshold for this miner activated soft fork is at 55% instead of the typical 90 or 95%, because even a small pool like F2 pool, which is about 10% of the hash, they can basically refuse to signal for it. And then even if just F2 pool refuses to go along with this, we can't even get to 90% signaling, not to mention Foundry, which is about 30% of the network, and Antpool and Friends, Bitmain, which is about 30% of the network. So expecting miners to somehow be part of the consensus on this, they're not going to be part of the consensus. Most of them are malicious. They're filling the chain with garbage, and they need to be brought into line. And this is how user-activated soft forks work. Again, we're giving them the opportunity to activate it themselves, to do the right thing, and to do what the vast majority of Bitcoiners want. And if they don't do it, then we will help them along and do it.
We're very far away from that. What would happen is everyone would just basically start accepting these more restricted rules, and a bunch of Bitcoin transactions that were previously valid wouldn't be anymore, and you couldn't use those in the future going forward. No past transactions would disappear. And that's why when certain things have had overwhelming consensus, the community has gone the soft fork route because it's backwards compatible. And if there is actually consensus, it's relatively clean, much more clean than a hard fork. But when you have a soft fork that's getting pushed by a very small amount of people loudly with cancel culture and lynch mob tactics.
Again, the lynch mob is just Bitcoin plebs running software to make clear their choices. And there is consensus for this in the sense that most Bitcoiners understand that Bitcoin's a monetary network. So again, he just keeps assuming the conclusion, and he's spreading FUD about something that is actually good for Bitcoin.
You end up in a situation that BIP-110 gets force activated before anyone even thinks there's consensus. So at least in past soft fork attempts, there's been an attempt to make consensus and see that there's consensus and people want to do it. In this case, it's actually probably the opposite. I don't see any.
One of the great ironies of this, of course, is that Taproot had 95% signaling and consensus, and it turned out to have this vulnerability that led to all the spam attacks. So even having full consensus, having the miners on board, perhaps they were on board because they knew this would be a new avenue for spam attacks. Probably not, but I think it's a little bit misleading here. And again, you can't expect the miners to agree with everything. They're employees of the network, and it's the Bitcoin node runners who make the rules, and the miners need to go along with this. So it's kind of absurd to be asking to be against BIP-110 simply because the large mining pools haven't signaled for it yet.
Any consensus building, I see just you either agree with us or you don't agree with us, but we're going to fucking do it, and you can go fuck yourself. You're captured.
Actually, we've been talking about this. Well, some people have been talking about it since early 2023. I've been talking about it probably since late 2024. I've made 12 months of videos about it. I have one of the largest channels. There's been a lot of talk about this. There's been a lot of attempt to educate people and build consensus. And the two people who haven't really been involved in this discussion has been Matt and Marty.
You're a pedophile. That's what I see right now, quite frankly, and you can go fuck yourself for it. So in that situation, what happened?
Yeah, don't call Matt and Marty pedophiles. I believe 100% that they're not, that they're good family men.
You have the BIP-110 chain will be very slow to make blocks, but it will be making blocks. The regular chain will be going. You'll have a chain split. You'll effectively have two chains. You can't have any kind of market dynamics that trade against them because there'll be no replay protection or anything. So you're just stuck.
You don't want replay protection, and you don't need it because we're not looking to have a permanent fork here. We're looking to have, we're basically looking to avoid a chain split. But if a chain split were to happen, we're looking for it to collapse fairly quickly. So replay protection is something we can talk about more in the future. But basically, I don't think we're going to need it, and especially we won't need it if this gets activated by the miners first.
Is a very big, important detail here.
You're stuck in this hell. You're like trapped in the hell with them, right? So they're making small blocks. Now, they're making blocks slower than the main chain, but they're still making blocks. Now, this is where it comes in. This is where the speculation comes into play. At that point, any reasonable person that cared about Bitcoin would just say, okay, there wasn't consensus. Maybe we'll try again later. Let's move on. Bitcoin's bigger than us. It's important. It's important that we have this neutral money. And, we didn't get our way this time, and that's fine. And they would just move on. Now, these people are...
Again, I think Matt should take a look at how many Bitcoin plebs are running the software for this fork. And another thing you can do after this video is done, I'm not going to do it right now, but you can scroll down and you can read the comment section. And I would say if there's any consensus here, it's definitely against Matt and Marty. So I think they're just totally missing what's going on here.
Are incredibly ideologically motivated. Their leader.
We're ideologically motivated in the sense that we think Bitcoin is a monetary network, and as such, it should be defended. I don't know why that's such a controversial position.
Want control, and they will not back down. So what they will do in that situation is probably similar to what Roger Ver did during the 2017 round, which is they'll spam the hell out of op return on the main chain. And it might include some really despicable shit.
So this, again, is the admission that the Bitcoin blockchain is exposed to horrible stuff. And this is exactly why we're trying to run BIP-110 to close that loophole. So yes, it's not going to be Mechanic, Luke, and myself. We're not going to dig up some CSAM and do this. This is absolutely disgusting and absurd. Other people may do it, but again, the underlying problem here, and most of the people who are running BIP-110, there seem to be family people, good people who aren't into perverted stuff, obviously. But the real problem here, as Odell admits, is that the legacy chain, the current Bitcoin blockchain, is open to attacks like this from nation state actors, from lots of different groups. And so he's basically agreeing with us, even though he doesn't realize that that's what he's doing. He's agreeing with us that the Bitcoin blockchain is currently vulnerable to large op return CSAM. And hey, I've got a solution for that. It's called BIP-110.
Then, once again, speculation. Then they will threaten miners and tell the miners, if you don't do our chain, then you...
No one's going to threaten miners. Miners are going to flee the chain that has CSAM on it, like any normal human being would do. And it's not going to be Ocean's lawyers telling them to do that. It's going to be their own lawyers telling them, this chain is full of garbage. This chain is vulnerable. Why don't we go over to the clean chain, the BIP-110 chain? And so that's how the game theory is going to work.
You are committing crimes or doing this. They're just going to go after all the miners. And if at any point they get more hash rate, significantly more hash rate on the BIP-110 chain, it will wipe out the original chain. It'll just completely wipe out. All those transactions will be reversed. If you deposit in exchange, reversed. If you made a transaction, you went and bought coffee or something, reversed. All those transactions will be...
And again, the way we can avoid this is by activating this early as a miner activated soft fork and not digging in and putting obstacles in the way of activating it like Odell is doing right here in this video. Again, we all use Bitcoin. We all live on Bitcoin. We don't want a chain split, and we don't want a chain split that lasts for a while. I think the game theory basically will prevent that from happening. One side is going to win really quickly. But again, this will be disruptive. The way to avoid this is activating it as a miner activated soft fork before August.
Will be reversed. Anyone running Lightning nodes will be at risk of fund loss. There could be significant damage to the chain at that point. And they understand.
Again, soft forks bring problems like this, but the larger problem is Bitcoin being degraded as a monetary network. This is a huge problem. We've seen the UTXO bloat, UTXO set bloat. We've seen the processing requirements go up. We've seen how long it takes to spin up a new node. These are all long-term problems. This is Bitcoin being killed by 1,000 cuts. And so we may have to undergo 48 hours of pain. But again, what's the solution that Matt and Marty have? Just to hide their heads in the sand and just keep hoping that Bitcoin, that somehow monetary transactions will eventually price out gamified spam. Again, they don't have a solution. All they're doing, we're trying to take action here. They're pointing out that some stuff could go wrong. But ironically, again, if they joined us, and they're anti-spam, if they joined us, none of this is going to happen. And so if there is disruption, I want you to remember how Odell and Marty Bent were fighting against this instead of joining us. And it makes no sense. It's just pure ego at this point to refuse to run BIP-110.
Understand game theory enough to be very damaging, because they believe that if they can get 10% of the hash, 15% of the hash to move to BIP-110, then the other miners will start freaking out, because it also reorgs their mining rewards.
And that's the whole point. The miners should freak out, because if they're not going to listen to the nodes, if they're going to go off and do their own thing, then we are going to bring them back into line. And this is the whole point. And this is why they will be brought back into line, and they'll come over to the BIP-110 chain if there's a chain split.
So if they can get any kind of momentum through their legal avenues and their threatening avenues and all this other shit.
Again, it doesn't have to be legal avenues or threatening. Any common sense, any corporation, any individual will always run the opposite direction from CSAM and spam and garbage, and they'll run to the clean chain. And again, Matt and Marty, why are you against a clean chain?
They believe they can then get enough momentum to eventually reorg the main chain. That is the goal. That is the goal here. It is incredibly reckless. Once again, it does not stop spam. And it's incredibly hypocritical, because these people say, oh, you shouldn't have a small group changing Bitcoin. And they are trying to push through a hostile fork of Bitcoin. That's significant.
We're not trying to change Bitcoin. We're trying to return it to the state it was in pre-2023, when the inscriptions exploit was blown open, and then 2025 when op return was blown open. We're trying to close these two holes and these large attack surfaces that were opened up by Bitcoin Core. We're not trying to change the block size here. We're not trying to change the proof of work algorithm. We're not trying to change anything. We're not trying to start our own shitcoin or anything like that. We're basically trying to fix all the things that have gotten broken while the influencer class like Matt and Marty have been asleep at the switch for the past 3 years.
Significantly changes it. So that's where we are right now. Activation is set for September. It will fail.
It will fail, it will fail, it will fail. It's strange you have to keep saying that, and you spend 20 minutes talking about something that you're so sure is going to fail, because I usually don't spend a lot of time on stuff that I don't think is going to happen.
I am disappointed. It's probably, I guess, it is what it is.
It is what it is. It's, I guess we'll be talking about this, but it's reckless on other levels too, because if you look at this, Wicked was pointing this out. Apparently there's a Telegram group or something, and people are becoming aware about
it. Looks like Matt and Marty are finally reading part of BIP-110. What they're going to talk about here is actually something that's very similar to what happened in 2017 with the activation of SegWit. We had BIP-148, which basically threatened to throw out any minor blocks that were not signaling in favor of SegWit. And this is one reason we have SegWit today. This is the main reason we have SegWit today. The main reason we have the Lightning Network is because of a very similar UASF. So just keep that in mind when they're laughing and criticizing how your node and my node are going to throw out blocks that are not signaling for BIP-110 come about August 10th or August 15th. If they'd spent the time to read BIP-110, again, they're getting their stuff from Twitter. It looks like they're getting it from Wicked or someone. But if they actually read this, they would be aware of it. And if they related this to BIP-148, they would know that there's a very clear precedent for this in Bitcoin history.
Just like the activation method. So before the unconditional activation at block 965,664, there's a mandatory signaling window between.
That's mandatory signaling for miners. And so if they do not signal in favor of BIP-110 in a block, their block will be thrown in the garbage. So this is really the first point at which we could have a chain split, not September 1st, but really I'd say the second or third week of August, depending on how fast the blocks come in.
Blocks 961, 632, 963, 647. So like 2 weeks before activation. And during this window, BIP-10 nodes reject any block that doesn't signal BIP-4.
I don't know why that's so funny. That's exactly how BIP-148 worked with the famous SegWit UASF.
In its version field. So you're just like immediately just rejecting anybody that doesn't signal, I want this.
Yeah.
Yep, that was just like BIP-148 in 2017. You really should tell your viewers that, remind them that.
It's an attack on Bitcoin. It is very clearly an attack on Bitcoin. And us voicing this opinion loudly is not good for our quote unquote careers. It is not good for the popularity contest on the internet. But none of that fucking matters. What matters is Bitcoin.
You don't care about the popularity contest.
Yeah, you should care, though, about a chain split, and you should care about disruption to Bitcoin, because it's one thing if your businesses depend on spam and you're really pro-spam and you think that Bitcoin's a data storage system. But I know you guys don't, so there's really no reason to be opposing it apart from ego, I would imagine.
Let's believe it or not.
I think the best part is these fucking Karens trying to get me fired when I am a partner at 1031, can't fire me, bitch.
How can you get
and
fired?
I'm the co-founder of OpenSats. I'm a fucking volunteer at OpenSats. So
the opposite side of this is people put incredible pressure on Jack Dorsey for his investment in Ocean. People have tried to get Luke canceled many times. People have tried to get Mechanic fired, etc. So it really goes from both directions. But I would encourage you, there's no reason to try to get Matt or Marty fired. And again, they have their own firm. No one's going to fire them. But what could happen in their careers is maybe if they spoke up and had some courage, David Bailey would invite them back to the Bitcoin conference. That would be the biggest risk. And you can surmise that that's perhaps why they haven't been quite as vocal against spam as people like I have been.
This is what it looks like. You guys can have fun attacking Bitcoin. I expect apologies when you realize you were in the wrong.
Again, we're the ones attacking Bitcoin. You're not going to talk about David Bailey, Taproot Wizards, Casey Rodamore, who discovered this whole exploit. All these bad actors. The only bad actors in Bitcoin are Luke Dasher and Mechanic and myself and the people running BIP-110. That's just absolutely absurd.
I don't think you will actually apologize, but you should. And you can go fuck yourself. I'm sick of it. And I was
What are you sick of? You haven't engaged in this discussion at all. I guess you're sick of avoiding it, or it's very strange. If you guys had just engaged with this discussion over the past 9 months, rather than doing this last minute crash out, and the only reason you're crashing out, Matt, is you see that this is actually going to happen, and that's why you're worried.
hoping there'd be a happy path. There is not going to be a happy path.
The way you get a happy path is by engaging in the debate and taking it seriously. And as we're going to see in a couple minutes, what you say, it's very clear that you haven't been engaging in this debate and taking it seriously. And again, people are busy. They have young families. They have portfolio companies to take care of, etc. But again, if you haven't done the work, please don't interfere with what we're trying to do. It just doesn't make sense. And you're acting against your own self-interest by doing so.
And that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. There was also some like consensus bug in the sort of implementation they put out, or
Yeah, that a core dev reported the bug to them.
And you know why core devs are looking at BIP-110? Because they're beginning to realize that this thing is actually going to go through and activate. And so it's nice that they're helping out. They're trying to make sure that there are no bugs. And this is, I think, a bad thing would be if no one were looking at BIP-110, Bitcoin Core devs weren't, or Luke or Bitcoin Knots devs were not looking at BIP-110 and inspecting the code. But this is, all software has bugs. These bugs have been discovered. Dathanome has fixed them very quickly. And again, the reason people are looking for bugs, if they thought this thing was never going to activate, people would just ignore it. People are finding bugs, they're getting fixed. And fortunately, we have Dathanome's eyes on this. And then again, we have the great Luke Dasher's eyes on this, who's really the master of UASFs and soft forks in Bitcoin's history. And he's Bitcoin's most brilliant dev. And all of his reputation, so much of our reputations are riding on this. And so we're going to make sure it's the best software possible. And again, this is the context of the greater context here, of course, is Bitcoin Core shipping Bitcoin Core version 30, which had a bug which deleted people's wallets, and people actually lost Bitcoin because of that. So to be laughing at bugs that have been found and are being patched, I don't remember them going on a rant and laughing that Bitcoin Core missed a bug, but these bugs are all being found and fixed. We're all running BIP-110 right now, Knots plus BIP-110. Everything seems fine, everything's working. And so I think this is a little bit hypocritical, especially if they didn't really jump down the throats of the Bitcoin Core devs who created who missed the bug that created wallet deletions in Bitcoin Core version 30.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's why I think it's reckless in another aspect too.
No, what's actually reckless is when you haven't even read BIP-110 to be opining about it to your large audience. This is incredibly counterproductive. And it means people like me have to make videos like this where I just keep saying the same thing again and again. Why don't you read BIP-110? Why don't you read our arguments? Why don't you actually engage with what's going on instead of just coming out against it?
Code base is not going to be audited thoroughly. Yes, Luke obviously has his hands in it, but he's not infallible. And luckily there are core devs trying to audit it in case it does go through and saying, hey, if you do this, you're going to completely bork this aspect of Bitcoin. But yeah, I think it's reckless on many levels. And
Let me be clear. Bitcoin that is controlled by a small group of Bitcoin Core devs or controlled by a small group of Bitcoin Knots devs is worthless. It's worthless. The whole value prop of Bitcoin is that it's not controlled by anyone.
100%. That's completely true. And that's why I helped to lead the exodus out of Bitcoin Core when they went rogue into Bitcoin Knots. And I don't remember you guys helping out with that at all at the time. So this is true. We want people to move node runners, to move node implementations when an implementation goes rogue. That's what happened last year. And all the people who are running Bitcoin Knots now were the people who took action while you guys were just complete fence sitters.
So whether you're Sailor or BlackRock or Knots or Core, you can go fuck yourself. You're not changing Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the best money if we can keep it that way. And fortunately,
if we can keep it that way, and if it doesn't get transformed into a data storage network because Bitcoin OGs are out to lunch working on their VC portfolios instead. Again, this is a fight that has to be had. Again, I would ask, at what point of UTXO set bloat would you guys think that something needs to be done about it? Would we have to get over 50%, over 60%, over 90%? this is what needs to be done now.
It is very resistant to change by default.
Yes. Yeah. The hypocrisy here, where it's like,
I mean, I love
we don't want you changing Bitcoin, so you need to do this and change Bitcoin, or bad things are going to happen. It's like, what?
Again, change Bitcoin to make it what it was back in 2023 before the inscriptions exploit and before large op returns were blown open. This is not a major change. This is basically just plugging all the holes that Bitcoin Core's maliciousness or incompetence left open.
I can go down a fucking huge list of hypocrisies. One of the best ones is Jack Dorsey funded OpenSats, so I'm captured by Jack Dorsey. Jack Dorsey also funded Ocean mining. The big difference between his funding of Ocean and the funding of OpenSats is Luke and Mechanic are taking a massive fucking salary from his money.
This is strange that Matt Odell would know the actual salary numbers of people. I'm not sure this is even true. But again, Ocean's a private company. They can do what they want. I'm not sure that Odell and Marty, I didn't view them originally as people who were against capitalism. And I think when you have OGs, I mean, Luke and his abilities and his history is absolutely priceless. Luke has done so much for Bitcoin, so I think it's great if he can make some money through a private company like Ocean. And same with Mechanic, who's been around forever in Bitcoin. So again, I don't even know if that's true, but I guess people shouldn't. I would agree with Odell. You shouldn't attack him for being somehow compromised by Jack Dorsey through OpenSats. If Jack Dorsey is also funding Ocean mining, and this is something that I said in a previous video where Odell was accusing me of being captured by Peter Thiel, that I was somehow being corrupted by Peter Thiel money, even though the last time I was on his payroll was in 2006. And then I pointed out that Peter Thiel has been bankrolling the Oslo Freedom Forum and Human Rights Foundation, HRF, and that Odell's been very involved in that. Again, I don't think he takes a salary. I think it's just volunteer work. So again, Odell is sort of guilty of the same sort of reasoning himself, at least when it came to me and Thiel.
And guess what? I took fucking nothing. So stop being a fucking hypocrite.
Is this I guess from now on it's gonna be a recurring theme. We're in the trenches now. I was a bit, and we discussed this before we went live. Like, I'm a bit big, like, maybe I'm misread the situation. I've been like, it's not that it's a nothing burger, but it seems. Yeah,
you absolutely misread the situation. You guys have been checked out for the last 9 months while this has been raging, hoping it would go away.
So sophomoric and poorly and sloppy.
No, what's sophomoric is when 20% of the network leaves the reference implementation and goes to a different node software implementation, and you don't spend every minute of all your videos covering it, Bitcoin Core going rogue, all these problems. That's what's sophomoric, actually.
Sloppily run. I was like, there's no way that this is an actual threat. But you seem describing how they've set it up. It is very creative. So be aware, freaks.
I see a comment in the live chat. What's my view on arbitrary data? My view on arbitrary data is that it can go fuck itself. We shouldn't have non-monetary transactions in chain, but it's unavoidable, and BIP-110 doesn't fucking fix it.
BIP-110 never claims to fix spam completely. Again, we can go read this. Does this solve spam completely? No, spam is best fought with policy filters, not consensus. This soft fork minimizes the impact of malicious miners and closes the worst case risks while sending a clear message that data storage is not a supported use case. So you would know that if you had read it. And again, if you're saying go F yourself to spam and to spammers, you really should be supporting BIP-110 because we're on the same page. We're on the same team here.
And me and Marty have spent years publicly in this space working and not shitcoining. We've never taken the easy route of shitcoining or scamming people.
That's true, and that's one reason that I've been watching RHR and TFTC since 2019, because these are basically good, decent human beings and family men. And so this is the tragedy that we're having this civil war here, and that they're on the other side of it, and they're hurling ad hominems at people like Luke and Mechanic and myself. But again, if you're going to say go F yourself to spam and scammers, etc., you really should be looking into BIP-110 and supporting it.
And so
And I actually meant to show this cartoon as part of that. There's no way to stop spam. That's why we had to make sure this door is open wide. This is from Hodlonaut. And this is a very good summary, basically, of Bitcoin Core's, the way that they've engaged with spam over the past few years.
So this idea that all of a sudden we are shitcoiners because we accept the fact that BIP-110 does not stop spam is bullshit.
Never claims to stop spam. You should just read the BIP.
Yeah, Logan, pull it up. Reardon Code was like calling this out earlier. And so having a conversation with this guy, Jim, if you try to restrict what other people put in the Bitcoin transactions, you're playing at censorship. I don't look inside other people's transactions.
It's not censorship if you're playing chess and someone wants to come over and play checkers on your same board. Censorship is something that the government does to people, or that Twitter used to do to people when Jack Dorsey was running it, basically enforcing the rules of the game, saying this is primarily a monetary network and you can take your scam and spams elsewhere. That's not censorship, but a lot of these guys are not very precise with their language.
And Jim responded, it's just limiting data size to optimize Bitcoin, no filtering based on interpretation of the data. But whatever you want in that optimized transaction, and spend Bitcoin however you like. And Reardon Code points out, it doesn't seem like you've actually read or understood the BIP. It does not limit data size in transactions, only limits how that data is formatted in this.
Basically, it closes all of the giant holes in Bitcoin transactions, all the places you can stuff large amounts of contiguous data. So I don't know why Reardon is saying that. He says, doesn't seem like you've actually read and understood the BIP. Well, I'm not sure Reardon has either. It does not limit data size in transactions, only limits how that data is formatted. It polices the content of other people's transactions. That's just completely not true. There's basically looking at opcodes, looking at how things are formatted. No one looks at what's inside of that. So you could even put something, an illicit image inside of op return. If it's 80 bytes, it's so tiny that it won't matter. But again, this isn't about content. This is about filtering and consensus rules based on opcodes, saying you can't stuff more than 83 bytes in op return. You can't stuff things into you can't do witness stuffing, etc. So it's content agnostic. And again, it just tries to minimize non-monetary content on the chain.
It polices the content of other people's transactions.
And this is the problem with Matt and Marty. They haven't done their own digging. So they're just relying on people like Reardon, who themselves are relying on Adam Back and Greg Maxwell. No one is verifying for themselves. Everyone's trusting. They're just pulling up tweets that agree with their own position. Whereas I've been making videos for 9 months. I've been putting myself out there. I've seen the criticism. I've tried to adjust my position in response to that. And this is how you actually engage with a very complicated debate. The problem is these two guys are still stuck at a very surface level of understanding what's going on. And as a result, they have to rely on the experts, ironically.
So it actually does let arbitrary data into the chain. Just they have a...
Yes, it lets very, very small amounts, 80 bytes in op return, and you can still stick 100 bytes in Coinbase. But other than that, you're going to have to chop stuff up. You're going to have to embed it really deeply and steganography if you want to do it. But the one place that's reserved for non-monetary data that everyone knows about since 2014, this one place where you can dump whatever you want, that is going to be closed by this BIP. And I wish these two guys would not be constantly ignoring that and muddying the waters and listening to people like Reardon, who are basically just bad actors, in my opinion.
A preference on what data actually gets in and what doesn't. So it is.
Yeah, it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It was never about spam. It's not about spam. Spam fucking sucks. The native Bitcoin spam filter is fees. And
absolutely absurd. This is just like a debate from 12 months ago. There is no reason to believe that Lightning closes and opens, or that Bitcoin monetary transactions settled on chain will eventually price out gamified spam. This is just an assertion. There's no reason we believe that this should be true. And what in fact we've seen is the opposite. We've seen more and more spam on chain in the past 5 years and fewer monetary transactions. So the actual trend, what's been happening in reality, is the complete opposite. But what Matt is repeating here, he's just repeating stuff that he's heard Adam Back and Greg Maxwell say.
And unfortunately, all the people that are trying to cancel us and are allowed about Bitcoin being money don't use Bitcoin as money. So fees have
That's just a false assertion. All the people who watch my channel, all the plebs running this, they're using Bitcoin as money. They're using their own nodes. They're running Bitcoin knots plus BIP-110. They've connected to Sparrow Wallet. They're using hardware wallets. They're using Lightning. They're running Start9, opening up their own Lightning channels. They're using Bitcoin as money. And so you shouldn't be criticizing the people who are in favor of Bitcoin knots and BIP-110. These are the real monetary maximalists. And it's funny you're not criticizing the David Baileys, the Casey Rodamores, all the spammers, the Udis, the Eric Walls, all the bad actors on the other side, the Jameson Lops, the Peter Todds, etc. Though you did criticize Peter Todd at the beginning of the video, so I appreciate that. But to attack plebs who are actually trying to use Bitcoin as money is just unbelievable.
have not been that high. So that's where we currently are at. But unless you want a centralized fucking group of people choosing what
Yeah, if we'd left it up to these guys, Bitcoin Core would still be running the show because they did absolutely nothing to help with the exodus to Bitcoin knots.
transactions go into Bitcoin and what transactions don't. The only alternative is that fees dictate the cost of these things.
Even Satoshi disagreed with that. He said this is one of the things, spam is something that can be partially prevented by transaction fees. And then in the next part of the sentence, he said, but there are other things we can do if we need to. And the whole history of Bitcoin, as I've demonstrated on my channel, from Counterparty in yesterday's video to the Opportune War of 2014, all the way up to the present, is you don't just fight spammers and scammers with transaction fees. You also fight them at every level. You fight them at the cultural level, and you fight them at the consensus level if you need to as well. And you don't just leave gaping holes open in the protocol like the inscriptions, the taproot vulnerability, and you also don't blow open larger places to put spam. It just makes absolutely no sense, the argument these two guys are making here.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know how Gmail handles spam? They just fucking have a group of woke people deciding what is fucking spam and what is not in your email filter. That's how they handle it.
I'm not sure exactly that's how it works, but they probably look for little various indicators like lots of dollar signs or where the emails are coming from, etc. But this is the other irony here, is to try to portray the Bitcoin knots, BIP-110 people as the woke people. This is absolutely absurd. If there is a woke contingent in Bitcoin, it's on Bitcoin Core, as we've seen. It's the spammers and scammers. It's people on the other side. So again, this is just pure misdirection on Odell's part.
So you're saying BIP-110 is akin to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, BIP-110 is just like woke people who work for Google. That makes a lot of sense. That's it'd be great if you guys actually read the BIP and didn't just set up straw men to knock down, because that's not how a real debate works.
They want to make Bitcoin Gmail, but instead of Google controlling it, they want Ocean Mining to control it.
Here we are. Beware, freaks. We've got other stuff to talk about this week.
And again, to address that last point, and then we'll end this video, Ocean Mining is the only mining pool that lets you build your own block templates and decide what goes into a block. Ocean has no control over that. You run your own node, you use Datum, and you decide what gets into a block. It's not Ocean deciding that. So again, just pure misinformation and trying to set up straw men. It's very, very disappointing. But hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you did, please hit the subscribe button. That does really help. Leave a like, leave a comment, a question, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And thanks a lot for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed this format. Hopefully it didn't drone on too long, but I just wanted to cover the whole segment. And hopefully you guys found this helpful. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.